Ecuador, and Peru. He didn't just kill, he hunted. A monster wearing the face of a man. Each crime a whisper in the fog.
Colombia, 1948. Pedro's world opens under a troubled sky. Born into hardship, noise, scarcity, and a city scarred by unrest.
Opens under a troubled
At 8,
sky.
he faced the
Born
streets,
into hardship,
hungry,
noise,
shivering,
scarcity,
and utterly alone.
and a city scarred
There
by
he learns
unrest. Under a
pain can
troubled
forge
sky.
power,
He faced the
and
streets,
fear can
hardship,
fly at
hungry,
any voice.
shivering,
In the
and utterly
Andes,
alone.
Lopez's crimes spread like a shadow.
Under a troubled
Silence
sky.
settled over the forgotten past. He targeted the poor, the forgotten, like a shadow. Young girls vanished without a trace. Villages whispered, El Monstro está aquí. The monsters vanished without a trace. Small gifts became fate. Trust turned into terror. The pattern left silence behind.
1918, a quiet Ecuadorian town. Silence held a secret.
Twisted Truths. The capture.
16 years. The maximum penalty then for more than the 300 lives taken. Pedro Lopez told investigators, "I am the world's greatest murderer of children," with chilling calm. He was convicted in Ecuador. The law's limit, 16 years. No more was possible then. A case that haunts justice.
No one knows where Pedro Lopez is.
Haunts.
Some say he's gone. Others fear he's among us. He destroyed hundreds of lives and then vanished without a trace. Proof the worst monsters hide in plain sight. You're watching Twisted Truths.
What if the nurse you trusted to save your life was secretly your killer? This is the story of Charles Cullen, the nurse of nightmares. Charles Cullen was born in 1960 in West Orange, New Jersey, the youngest of 8 children. His childhood was marked by pain and loss. His father died before Charles was even born, and his mother passed away in a tragic car accident when he was just a teenager. Alone and broken, Cullen often felt out of place in the world. This loneliness, mixed with depression and mental health struggles, would shadow him throughout his life. Despite his struggles, Cullen seemed to find purpose in nursing. To the outside world, he was a compassionate caretaker, moving quietly through hospital wards. But beneath that calm exterior was a man who would one day confess to killing dozens, possibly hundreds, of patients. His story isn't just about murder, but about betrayal, how someone entrusted with saving lives instead became one of America's most prolific killers. Hospitals are meant to heal. But for Charles Cullen, each new hospital became a hunting ground. After finishing nursing school, Cullen began his career in the 1980s. He worked in over 9 different hospitals and nursing homes, spanning across New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Each time he moved, mysterious deaths seemed to follow him. Patients who weren't expected to die suddenly coded. Yet, instead of uncovering the truth, hospitals quietly let Cullen go, afraid of lawsuits and public outrage. This silence allowed him to keep killing in new places. Cullen was skilled at blending in. He was quiet, hardworking, and often took the toughest shifts. To his co-workers, he seemed like a dedicated nurse. But at night, when patients trusted him the most, he secretly transformed into their executioner. He wasn't caught for years, because the very institutions designed to protect patients failed to stop him, choosing reputation over lives. No blood. No violence. Just a syringe and silence. Charles Cullen turned medicine into murder. Cullen's methods were chillingly simple. He used drugs that were already available in hospitals, insulin, digoxin, and other heart medications. In the right doses, these drugs saved lives. But in Cullen's hands, they became invisible weapons. A small injection could cause a patient's heart to stop or push their blood sugar to fatal lows. Because the deaths looked natural, most doctors and families never suspected foul play. What made Cullen especially dangerous was his ability to hide his crimes in plain sight. Hospital deaths weren't unusual, and without clear evidence, his actions blended into everyday medical tragedy. He often claimed he wanted to end suffering, but many of his victims weren't terminally ill, they could have lived for years. His so-called mercy was nothing but murder disguised as care, making him one of the most deceptive killers in history. What drives a nurse to heal by day and kill by night? To understand Charles Cullen, we must step inside his mind. Charles Cullen's life was marked by trauma long before his murders. Born in 1960, he grew up in a troubled household, losing his father before birth and his mother in a tragic car accident as a teen. Alone and emotionally shattered, he attempted suicide multiple times, leaving behind a trail of psychiatric hospitalizations. His struggles with depression, loneliness, and rejection followed him into adulthood, shaping the mind of a man who would later become one of the deadliest killers in medical history. Cullen later claimed he killed to end suffering, painting himself as a kind of mercy killer. But investigators revealed the truth: many of his victims weren't terminally ill. Some were even recovering. His actions had less to do with mercy and more to do with control and compulsion. Psychologists describe him as a man obsessed with power, the quiet nurse who could play God, deciding who lived and who died with just a syringe. Behind every statistic was a human life, stolen by Charles Cullen's deadly hands. Cullen confessed to killing at least 29 patients, but experts believe the real number could be over 400. His victims included the elderly, the vulnerable, and even young patients, ordinary people who trusted him in their final moments. Inside hospitals like St. Barnabas, Warren Hospital, and Somerset Medical Center, patients who were supposed to be safe instead became prey. Their deaths were quiet, often disguised as natural, leaving families grieving without answers for years. The tragedy of Cullen's victims is not just in their numbers but in their silence. Many families didn't learn the truth until long after, when Cullen finally confessed. For every known victim, there may be dozens more whose deaths were never investigated. The real body count will likely never be known, lost in hospital records and medical charts that never raised alarms. Each name left behind is a reminder of how much was stolen and how deeply trust was betrayed. Charles Cullen didn't work alone. His greatest accomplices were silence and negligence. From the late 1980s to the early 2000s, suspicious deaths followed Cullen everywhere he went. Staff noticed unusual patient declines during his shifts. Administrators received complaints. Some even labeled him with "do not rehire" warnings. Yet instead of reporting him to authorities, hospitals quietly let him resign, passing him along to the next facility. The priority wasn't saving lives, it was protecting hospital reputations. That silence gave Cullen the freedom to keep killing for nearly 2 decades. After his arrest, lawsuits mounted against hospitals for negligence. Some settled privately with victims' families, but no hospital executives were criminally prosecuted. The scandal was so severe that New Jersey passed a new law, the Cullen Law, requiring hospitals to report suspicious staff to licensing boards. But for hundreds of patients, this accountability came too late. Charles Cullen wasn't just a single man's crime, he was the failure of an entire healthcare system.
For nearly 2 decades, Charles Cullen evaded justice. But what finally brought him down? 2003, suspicions at Somerset Medical Center grew too strong to ignore. Patients were dying under mysterious circumstances, and nurses began whispering about Cullen's behavior. When lethal doses of digoxin showed up in toxicology reports, investigators knew they had a killer inside the hospital. Still, catching him wasn't easy. Cullen was careful, and hospitals had a history of protecting their own. Enter Amy Lufford, a fellow nurse and Cullen's close friend. When police approached her, they asked her to secretly help. With a wiretap and recorded conversations, Amy confronted Cullen, leading him to slip up and reveal details only the killer could know. This brave act turned Amy into the key witness who ended one of the deadliest killing sprees in medical history. When Charles Cullen faced justice, the world wanted answers. But what he confessed left everyone speechless. In court, Cullen shocked investigators by openly confessing to killing dozens of patients. His flat, emotionless tone left families outraged. He showed no remorse, only indifference. Prosecutors charged him with multiple counts of murder and attempted murder, but the true number of victims remained uncertain, lost in years of hospital silence. In 2006, Cullen was sentenced to 11 consecutive life terms without parole. The judge made it clear he would never walk free again. During sentencing, angry family members demanded answers. Some called him a coward, others begged for the truth about their loved ones. Cullen, however, stayed stone-faced, cementing his reputation as a cold and unrepentant killer. Charles Cullen's crimes didn't just end with his arrest, they changed hospitals forever. The Cullen case exposed shocking flaws in hospital systems. For years, institutions prioritized their reputations over patient safety, quietly letting Cullen move on rather than reporting him. After his arrest, lawmakers acted. New Jersey passed the Cullen Law, forcing hospitals to report suspicious behavior by medical staff. Across the U.S., stricter monitoring of drugs and patient deaths was implemented, all because of one man's killing spree. Cullen's story also sparked public outrage, forcing people to question how much trust they place in healthcare. Families of victims became advocates for change, ensuring that no other serial killer could hide behind a nurse's uniform again. While Charles Cullen may spend the rest of his life behind bars, the ripples of his crimes continue to shape medicine, justice, and public trust to this very day. Charles Cullen's crimes prove that evil can hide in the most trusted places. His arrest brought justice, but also exposed how fragile safety can be when institutions fail. One man's crimes forced hospitals to face the truth: patient safety had failed. Charles Cullen's killing spree exposed shocking gaps in hospital oversight. For years, administrators looked the other way, prioritizing reputation over lives. His crimes led to outrage, forcing lawmakers to act. In New Jersey, the Cullen Law was passed, requiring hospitals to report suspicious staff to state boards. Across the U.S., new safety checks on medication, hiring, and patient deaths were introduced. Cullen's case also made hospitals rethink how nurses and doctors are monitored. Drug dispensing systems became more secure, red flags like sudden patient decline started being tracked, and reporting systems were tightened. While these changes came too late for Cullen's victims, they reshaped healthcare safety and remain his unintended legacy. Even behind bars, Charles Cullen's shadow still lingers over America's hospitals. Cullen is serving multiple life sentences in a New Jersey prison, but his story continues to haunt America. He has been called America's most prolific serial killer, with a suspected death toll possibly over 400. The uncertainty around his victim count makes his case especially chilling, because no one knows the true scale of his crimes. What makes Cullen's story so terrifying is not just the body count, but where it happened: inside hospitals, the very places meant to save lives. To this day, his case is taught in medical schools, discussed in documentaries, and feared by patients who wonder if trust in healthcare can ever be absolute. Charles Cullen's legacy is not just one of death, but of broken trust, a shadow America still struggles to escape. Hollywood told his story, but how much of it was true? Netflix's The Good Nurse, based on Charles Gruber's book, brought Cullen's story to millions of viewers. The film highlights Amy Luffern's bravery in helping police capture Cullen and portrays the tense relationship between the two nurses. While the movie gets the heart of the story right, Cullen's coldness, Amy's heroism, and the hospital's negligence, it also takes some liberties for dramatic effect. In reality, Cullen's crimes were even darker than what the film showed. He worked in 9 hospitals over 16 years, and his suspected victim count is far higher than the movie suggests. While The Good Nurse simplified events to fit into a 2-hour runtime, the truth is much more disturbing. Families never got the closure Hollywood offered. Many will never know if their loved ones were victims. Charles Cullen's story reminds us that evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes, it wears scrubs and carries a stethoscope. His crimes reshaped hospitals, inspired films, and left a legacy of fear that still lingers. In the end, he remains one of the darkest figures in true crime history. You are watching Twisted Truth. Stay tuned for the next chilling story. Late 1970s England, a quiet town gripped by fear. But who was the man hiding in the shadows? In the northern streets of Yorkshire, women lived in fear as nightfall came. A faceless predator was roaming, striking suddenly and vanishing into the dark. For years, the police searched, but the killer always seemed one step ahead. This wasn't just any criminal, this was the beginning of the reign of Peter William Sutcliffe, later infamously named the Yorkshire Ripper. But how did Sutcliffe manage to elude capture for so long? He blended in, unnoticed, but his nights revealed something far darker. Sutcliffe's first attacks seemed random. A hammer, a knife, the dead of night, women became his unsuspecting prey. Yet, he lived a seemingly ordinary life by day, working regular jobs and keeping a calm image. This double existence made him nearly invisible to authorities. By the late 70s, fear had spread so deeply that the streets of Yorkshire were deserted at night. No one knew when, or where, he would strike next. The police began to close in, but Sutcliffe's trail of terror only grows. Over 5 years, he attacked again and again, and the police were desperate. Investigators interviewed thousands of men and followed endless leads. Yet, Sutcliffe's careful lies and ordinary lifestyle allowed him to slip away time and time again. The hunt was intense, a whole region living under curfew-like fear. He was questioned multiple times by police, but each time released, as no solid evidence tied him directly. His capture felt like chasing smoke. But no secret stays hidden forever. One mistake was all it took, and the Ripper was unmasked. In 1981, a routine traffic stop changed history. Police discovered false license plates on Sutcliffe's car. When searched, they uncovered weapons, the same tools used in the attacks. Finally, after years of terror, the Yorkshire Ripper was caught. His confession revealed a dark obsession that had driven his every crime. The people of Yorkshire could breathe again, but the scars of fear never fully healed. It started as whispers in the dark, unexplained attacks. Then, one by one, those whispers turned into screams across Yorkshire. The first attacks. Sutcliffe's earliest crimes didn't draw much attention at first. In 1969, he attacked a woman with a hammer but was interrupted and fled. Over the next few years, he assaulted several more women, leaving them with terrible injuries but alive. Some victims were too frightened to report him, while others weren't believed by police. These early strikes were dismissed as isolated crimes, but they were actually the beginning of a chilling pattern. Sutcliffe was testing himself, refining his methods, and building the confidence to kill. The escalation into murder. By 1975, Sutcliffe crossed the line from attacker to murderer. His first confirmed victim was Wilma McCann, a young mother from Leeds, found brutally killed near her home. Panic began to spread. Over the next 5 years, Sutcliffe murdered 12 more women and attempted to kill at least 7 others. His victims came from different walks of life. Some were workers, others were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The randomness of his attacks made it impossible to predict his next move. The entire region was living in fear. Streets emptied after sunset, women walked in groups, and taxi services were overwhelmed with requests. The Yorkshire Ripper had become a shadow no one could escape. The police investigation. The police response was massive, one of the largest investigations in British history. Officers interviewed more than 250,000 people and checked millions of car registrations. Every man who matched even the slightest description was questioned. And Sutcliffe? He was interviewed by police 9 separate times. Each time, he convinced them he wasn't their man. His calm, quiet personality, steady work record, and lack of direct evidence allowed him to slip through their fingers. Adding to the chaos, police were thrown off track by a cruel hoax, letters and a tape supposedly from the killer, signed Wearside Jack. This hoax wasted years of police time, sending them north to Sunderland while Sutcliffe continued killing freely in Yorkshire. The public grew angry, women protested for better safety, and pressure on investigators mounted. But fate has a way of catching up.
Hundreds of officers, thousands of interviews, yet the killer was right under their noses. The Yorkshire Ripper case became one of the largest police investigations in British history. Over the years, detectives interviewed more than 250,000 people and collected millions of car registration details. Entire police departments were consumed by the hunt. The public demanded answers as the murders kept piling up. Despite their enormous efforts, the investigation grew chaotic. Too many leads, too many suspects, and too much pressure from the media. And yet, in all that confusion, Peter Sutcliffe was interviewed not once, not twice, but 9 times by police. Each time, he calmly explained himself, gave believable answers, and was let go. His ordinary appearance, steady job, and quiet nature gave him the perfect disguise. To the outside world, he seemed harmless, but in reality, every release gave him the freedom to kill again. A voice from the shadows sent police chasing ghosts, while the real killer kept striking. As pressure mounted, investigators received an unexpected twist: letters and a cassette tape claiming to be from the Yorkshire Ripper. The messages, signed Wearside Jack, taunted the police, mocked their failures, and sent detectives searching in the wrong direction. The voice on the tape carried a Sunderland accent, and investigators became convinced their killer was from the northeast of England. For years, the hoax derailed the investigation. Officers poured countless hours and resources into chasing the fake lead while Sutcliffe continued to murder freely in Yorkshire. The public grew furious at the failures, women marched demanding safety, and the entire nation began to lose faith in the authorities. In the end, the letters and tape were proven to be nothing but a cruel trick, one that had cost precious lives. In the end, it wasn't a grand investigation, it was one simple mistake. In January 1981, everything changed during a routine traffic stop in Sheffield. Sutcliffe was pulled over for driving with false number plates. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a minor offense. But when police searched his car, they found hidden weapons, a hammer and a knife, eerily similar to those used in the Ripper attacks. Alarm bells went off instantly. Taken into custody, Sutcliffe's calm mask finally slipped. Within days, he confessed to being the Yorkshire Ripper, admitting to 13 murders and several attempted murders. After years of fear, frustration, and failure, the truth was finally out. The man who had terrorized Yorkshire was unmasked not by the massive. The courtroom echoed with horror as justice was finally delivered. Peter Sutcliffe's trial began in May 1981 at the Old Bailey, one of Britain's most famous courts. The case drew massive public attention, with survivors, families of victims, and the press watching every word. Sutcliffe admitted to the killings but tried to argue diminished responsibility, claiming he was guided by voices. His defense team pushed for a reduced sentence, suggesting he should be sent to a psychiatric hospital instead of prison. The jury, however, rejected his claims. They found him guilty of 13 murders and 7 attempted murders. Justice bore down on him. Sutcliffe was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole-life tariff, meaning he would never be released. The court made it clear, the man who had terrorized Yorkshire would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Even behind bars, Sutcliffe couldn't escape violence. Locked away, Sutcliffe's life inside prison was far from peaceful. Other inmates despised him for his crimes, and he quickly became a target. He was attacked multiple times, beaten with sharpened weapons, and once left partially blind after an assault. Prisoners saw him as the embodiment of evil, and they wanted him to suffer for what he had done. Despite the constant threats, Sutcliffe spent decades behind bars in high-security facilities like Broadmoor Hospital and later HMP Frankland. His health declined in later years, and he grew frail. In 2020, Sutcliffe contracted COVID-19 and died shortly after, bringing an end to one of Britain's most infamous killers. His crimes didn't just destroy lives, they reshaped a nation. The Yorkshire Ripper case shook Britain to its core. It exposed deep flaws in the police system, especially how officers handled female victims and how resources were wasted chasing false leads like the Wearside Jack hoax. The case became a turning point in British policing, leading to major reforms in how serial investigations were conducted. Beyond policing, Sutcliffe's crimes ignited the women's rights movement across the UK. Protesters filled the streets demanding safety, accountability, and respect for victims. His actions forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about gender violence and public safety. Even decades later, his legacy remains a dark reminder of how fear can change a nation and how resilience can lead to reform. You've been watching Twisted Truths, where crimes are uncovered and justice is revealed. But here's the question: did Sutcliffe's punishment truly bring closure to his victims' families, or does his shadow still linger over Britain today? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next chilling story.